Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News Extra, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. The Pope's coffin has been moved to St. Peter's Basilica, where it will remain in an open casket for the public to mourn over the next 3 days. President Donald Trump has said the US is very close to brokering a deal to end the war in Ukraine. The world's richest man and Tesla boss Elon Musk says he will significantly cut back his role in the US government as the electric car firm's profits plunge. To our top story, the body of Pope Francis has been moved from his residence in the Vatican to St. Peter's Basilica, where it will lie in state. Thousands of mourners have been paying their respects as they pass by the open coffin, which will remain on display for 3 days of public mourning. To discuss this and all of today's stories, I'm joined by media strategist and former editor-in-chief Michael Jabri-Pickett and Al Arabiya's geopolitical security analyst Riyadh Kawaji. Thank you so much for joining me, Michael and Riyadh. So let's start with you, Michael. Real incredible scenes today, you know, those mourners filing past the coffin, obviously paying their final respects. How significant is this for Catholics around the world?
It's incredibly significant. I mean, the Pope is the head of the Church. Unlike some of the other big religions, Catholics have that one person who represents, embodies, and helps the Church navigate issues that are at the top of the agenda when that person is in power. It's also, I would say, not just for Catholics. You know, I think that there is, and I don't say this in a derogatory way, there is a spectacle about what's going on. At the Catholic Church, I was raised Catholic. The Catholic Church, as I know very well, is full of pomp and ceremony. And it will be on display for the next couple of weeks. And I think that there's a fascination that people around the world, no matter your denomination, that people have when it comes to the rituals that take place. You know, some of these rituals have been going on for hundreds, some even, you know, a couple of thousand years. And that, I think, captures the fascination of so many people. And so there will be people who will be watching on Saturday for the funeral, who I think are watching from around the world and of pretty much every denomination.
And Riyadh, just to you, he was really a pope, and we've spoken about this a lot, and I've heard about this a lot, a pope of the people. You know, he was someone who touched a lot of people around the world in different countries that might have not had access to the Catholic Church, but he was a real advocate for peace during times of real hardship.
Definitely, he was the pope of the people. I think this was a unanimous view of a lot of officials and media outlets globally. Moreover, he was a pope that helped level bridges, helped level walls and build bridges between civilizations. We all remember Pope Francis' trip to Abu Dhabi in 2019, where he met with the Sheikh of Azhar, one of the most senior Muslim figures in the Middle East. And they signed this joint declaration about tolerance and coexistence between religions. This was a significant, and he held this big mass in a Muslim country like Abu Dhabi. UAE, known for its cosmopolitan country that advocates tolerance and so forth, but then we have the head of the Catholic Church holds mass in Abu Dhabi that was attended by tens of thousands of people. Also his famous trip to Mosul in Iraq, after the defeat of ISIS, where he went to the ruins of the church in Mosul, a famous old church, and he held mass with the objective of encouraging the Christians of Iraq and other Middle Eastern countries to hold to their land, to their roots. And this was also very significant to show his care to the Christians wherever they are, and his care for building the bridges with all the other religious or other religions globally to advocate for international peace.
No, pretty amazing man. I don't know what you make yourself of what Riyadh said, but do you agree with that? For the Catholic Church, he was somebody different in many respects.
He was, as he said, as Riyadh said, he was building bridges. And he was also trying to, I think, do a better job of connecting, as I said earlier, the pomp and ceremony, the rituals of the church with the people who are of the global south. And he wanted to make sure that everybody understood that we could all play a role in this church, and he wanted to lead by example. This is why I think, the actions that he took that were so humble in their origins, and he was always focused on trying to connect with people. He was making phone calls, as we've discussed before. He was making phone calls every night to priests in the Palestinian territories, either in Gaza or the West Bank. And he was making sure that he would go out on the streets of Rome, and he was interacting with the poor, the disenfranchised, and he was leading by example. And I think there is no better way for a leader, a true leader, to lead than by example.
And I don't know if you've watched the film. Have you watched the film Conclave, Riyadh? Because there's some really interesting stats out. Apparently, Conclave, the viewership went up 283% on the day of the Pope's death, which is just something that shows us how interested people are from around the world, not even Catholics.
Today, my daughter was asking me whether we could watch it together. So,
oh, wow.
Definitely. So this just here to affirm their point of view here, that it has created a lot of attention and interest across the whole world, across the whole religions, to know about this process, to select this pan that will embody a lot of meanings, religious and holiness, to the Catholic community. And also because of the intensive activity of the late Pope in building the bridges, he made many people of other religions more aware of this, the role and the significance of the papacy on the global scale.
And also, for instance, today, when people were queuing, I was watching that queue, and I don't know what you both make of this, but I thought it's 20,000 people in 8-hour wait to file past the casket, and that shows, what the Catholics believe in. It's faith, resilience, it's patience, all of those things, and such emotion once they had been able to view the Pope.
Yeah, and I think that that's natural when, you have somebody who comes to embody 2,000 years of history. And he might have sometimes shied away from the full force of the institution, and he wanted to be more of the people. But at the end of the day, he was somebody that was the leader of more than 1 billion people. And an institution that's been around, as I say, for 2,000 years. And I think that when people are put in that situation where they see somebody who's lying in state, I think it will bring, especially the faithful, to an emotional state themselves where they are fortunate enough to be in that moment where they see this. And it also, I think as a Catholic, it also makes you sort of recognize your place in the world as well.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much for both of your points there on the Pope and his upcoming funeral. Stay right there and we'll be right back with you. We're going to take a look at some of the other stories making the headlines today. An Israeli airstrike on a school sheltering displaced families in northern Gaza has killed at least 10 people. A separate strike has hit a children's hospital. The Gaza Health Ministry said the missile damaged the intensive care unit and destroyed the solar panel system that feeds the facility with power. The disgraced movie mogul Harvey Weinstein's retrial has begun today after his landmark 2020 rape conviction in New York was overturned. He's been retried on charges of rape and sexual assault, which he was found guilty back in 2020 and sentenced to 23 years in prison. He has pleaded not guilty. Residents in Ocean County, New Jersey, have fled their homes as a fast-moving wildfire has swept through the area. About 3,000 people have been placed under a mandatory evacuation order on Tuesday. Officials have now said the order had been lifted, but shelters had been set up at 2 schools. And a magnitude 6.2 earthquake has hit Istanbul in Turkey. The quake was felt in several neighboring provinces and in the city of Izmir. There were no immediate reports of serious damage or any injuries. Now, President Donald Trump has said the U.S. is very close to brokering a deal to end the war in Ukraine. He made the claim in a long Truth Social post. He also continued to put pressure on Zelensky to agree to a peace deal, saying, "We are very close to a deal, but the man with no cards to play should now finally get it done." Earlier today, we also heard from the U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, who warned Russia and Ukraine that they must strike a deal or Washington may end its efforts to help them reach a ceasefire. Let's take a listen.
Ukrainians and the Russians are both going to have to give up some of the territory they currently own. There's going to have to be some territorial swaps. We've issued a very explicit proposal to both the Russians and the Ukrainians, and it's time for them to either say yes or for the United States to walk away from this process. We have engaged in an extraordinary amount of diplomacy, of on-the-ground work. We're going to see if the Europeans, the Russians, and the Ukrainians are ultimately able to get this thing over the finish line.
So, Riyadh, we just heard from J.D. Vance there, but this is something Marco Rubio has also said in the past, that they're prepared to walk away from these talks if nothing's done. We also saw that today in London, they were meant to have this high-level delegation discussion. Rubio pulled out. What do you make of all of this?
Well, it's obviously that the parties concerned in these negotiations are not all on the same page. We have to remember, there are 2 parties to the conflict, direct parties. One is Ukraine and the other one is Russia. But there are Europeans are very much involved in this conflict. They were all behind Ukraine because they feel or they regard the Russian attack on Ukraine as a threat to whole of Europe. Because based on the outcome of this war, Russia could move one way or the other. And here we can see that the great concern emanates from what was revealed in the proposal. And according to the mainstream media, like today the New York Times is saying that the US proposal favors the Russian position too much. And even the Telegraph, the UK, the same position, and it goes further by warning that if this proposal goes through, it will resemble a great threat. It will lead to more wars in Europe and globally, where the major power, or the big powers, are going to try to prey on the smaller powers and take chunks of territory from them. It's a return to imperialism. So this is the main concern here. That's why Ukraine and Europe both have voiced strong reservations on the proposal.
Do you agree with this?
I do agree. I think that if the U.S. walks away from this, they are formally abdicating the role that they have held since the end of the Second World War. And I think, to Riyadh's point, what message does this send? Let's bring it back home. What message does this send to the Israelis who will go into Gaza, take what they want? They'll go into the West Bank, which is pretty much what they've done anyhow. But now there's a precedent that's been set. And I think this is one of the concerns that the Europeans have, is that if an aggressor can go in and take something, and then there's a peace deal at the insistence of the US, and it's only signed after the aggressor has taken what it wants, what message does that send to other countries around the world that are thinking, if we can build up our own military, if we can be a little bit more aggressive, well, there's nobody on the global stage who's going to be stopping us anymore. It was the US, but they don't seem to want that role anymore.
What do you think Europe make of all of this, Riyadh? Because the reality is Donald Trump has always said from the beginning that he would end this war in 24 hours. He also said he wanted to stop the death. He didn't want the war to, continue. He wanted to save lives. Now we seem to be in the situation where no one really knows how close we are to ending this war.
I think there are 2 or 3 main points of contention here that have left U.S. or drove the U.S. proposal and this position from the Europeans who have these reservations on it. First, and also the Ukrainians. The first point is that U.S. recognizing Russia's legitimacy, the annexation of Crimea. That's a precedent. This is what was referred to as the main point of concern, that any country can now occupy another and it will be accepted by the US. Second is that there are no guarantees, security guarantees from the US. The US is just keeping the whole thing that it's the Europeans who will deploy troops in Ukraine, and there's no commitment, security commitment from the US, while Ukraine from the very start was saying everything will hang on the level of security commitments it gets from the US. And for now, the proposal does not give any commitments from the US side. And the third is, of course, the Ukrainian position. How are you going to convince the Ukrainians that they're going to be giving up territory? They seem to be okay with the fact that they accept a status quo where Russia is occupying force. And they will have a peace deal that will go on for years with Russia not committing any aggression, but there will be no recognition by the Europeans or the Americans or anybody of Russia's legitimacy on these occupied territories. And this is, I think, what is causing the, let's say, the disagreement, the dispute at the moment.
It just seems to be that the main sticking point. And also, a lot of people are arguing in international law, you can't redraw countries' boundaries. So this is another major sticking point. But Michael, do you think there's a massive disconnect between the talks that are ongoing and actually the reality of how people are living in Ukraine and in Russia as this war continues?
Yeah, I don't think that the war is popular in either country. And I think at a certain point, it's human nature, not that I've fortunately never experienced it, but enough. And this has been going on for 3 years. And the Ukrainians are suffering. And the Russians, the ones that have stayed, who have not wanted to go into the military and have been conscripted, they, of course, don't want the fighting to continue as well. And that's why you've seen that Russia has relied on some of their partners around the world for some of their troops to come in and help fight on their side. But I think that the people themselves, I mean, it's always the case where it's the civilians. As we can see, again, I'm going to mention Gaza, but the civilians, it's the women and the children and the non-combatants who are more often than not the real victims of the war.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, Riyadh.
Well, I mean, 2 things. First, will the U.S. actually walk away from this? And how this is going to affect the U.S. standing globally, especially amongst its allies?
Yeah.
And and if the deal goes through, what effect will this have globally on issues like China and Taiwan? And how will the U.S. justify objecting to China's control of, or possible invasion of Taiwan when it has sanctioned Russia's annexation of Crimea? So these are we are in a paradox here, I think. But it seems from President Trump's point of view, it's all about transactional issues, and it's going to cause a lot of controversy. And again, it's going to be very painful for Ukraine if the U.S. walks away, because it's very hard to fill the gap, the military support gap the U.S. had provided.
It's a tricky line to walk, definitely. But as Donald Trump says, he is convinced a deal is not far away. So we'll watch and see what happens. But just stay right there. I'll be right back with you. Now, US stocks are extending gains following a report that suggests the White House is considering slashing tariffs on China to de-escalate the trade war between the two countries. President Donald Trump echoed that sentiment, saying he won't play hardball on trade and is optimistic that he will make progress with China. Earlier, I spoke to Al Arabia's senior correspondent Karina Kamel, and she explained the surge in markets in further detail.
Well, there are two main factors driving what we can consider a relief rally today on U.S. markets, but also global markets in general. And the two key factors are the sort of de-escalation we've seen in the comments coming from both President Donald Trump, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, and other sources close to the administration with regards to the China trade talks. So that's one element that's reassuring markets to a large extent. And also perhaps a dialing down of the criticism against the Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell. So these two factors have led to a lot of the assets that we saw sold off over the past few days regaining momentum. In fact, the markets actually turned positive yesterday just on the mention of some positive comments that were leaked from a private meeting attended by the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. It was a closed meeting. There was no media there. And just the leaks of some of the comments he made were enough to drive the Dow Jones Index of equities up 1,000 points. That was yesterday. The rally continued throughout yesterday's session, and it has gained momentum today on the back of a number of factors. So first of all, we had this comment from the Wall Street Journal reporting that tariffs, which are currently at 145% on Chinese imports, could be dropped to as low as 50 or 60%. Then we got some comments from sources close to the White House saying that perhaps as a sort of opener, the U.S. administration could actually lower tariffs to encourage China to come to the table. So we're talking about a sort of carrot versus a stick approach. And then we had more positive comments from the president himself last night saying that the tariffs he expected would be much lower on China than they currently are. And then again today, more positive comments saying he expects a fair deal. Scott Bessent indicating that the current situation is unsustainable. So essentially, all the noises coming out of the White House are very positive on the China trade story.
Now to the world's richest man, billionaire, businessman Elon Musk has said he'll significantly cut back his role in the US government. It comes after his electric car firm Tesla reported disastrous first quarter earnings. So, Michael, we've heard whispers that Musk was going to pull back from his involvement in the Trump administration. That was denied. Now we actually see he said, I'm significantly going to scale back. Does it come as a surprise?
So there's no surprise for a couple of reasons. One, we knew with his appointment, he was only allowed to be an employee for 130 days anyhow. So it was going to come to an end at the end of May. Legally, not that the Trump administration is necessarily following all the laws that they should, but that's the way that it should have happened. But then when you see that, Tesla stocks from December are trading at 50% of the value. From last year to this year, profits are down 71%.
71, yeah.
And there's no way that Musk is immune to the comments that people are making. There was one analyst that has said Tesla is Musk, Musk is Tesla, which means that as your job with the government is legally coming to a close, and as one of the companies for which you're well known for is doing incredibly poorly. You know, he's facing stiff competition, especially from some of the Chinese products. His politics are not winning him over any fans. A recent Pew Research poll found that more than half of Americans had a negative perception of Elon Musk. You can't continue to be on social media, on X as he is all the time, and think that everything is going along as it should be. And so when you're on a call as he was today with shareholders, and during that call when it was announced that he said he's going to be coming back, stocks had gone up 5%. And because of that, everybody recognizes that he's best positioned to be going back to Tesla, and I think it was just a matter of time.
But Riyadh, did he actually help make America great again?
Well, that remains to be seen. The final verdict will come from the American people. Maybe in the elections next year, we'll find out. Because the role he played is the equivalent to a role of a CEO brought in the company just to take over of the layovers, you know. And this is what he did. That was his job, leading Dodge, this organization that was slashing and cutting and responsible for the dismissals of thousands and thousands of federal employees in the U.S. So definitely that's a negative image, whether it is being done rightly for the right reasons, but for the people, these are their neighbors, their friends who are losing their jobs that they held for years. And they are being dismissed for various reasons. And many of them see it unjust. And there are many cases at courts right now because of this. So, and all of them, the front for all of this was not President Trump. It was Elon Musk. Yeah. And he has, as the main brand for all the companies he owns, he is suffering business-wise. And I'm sure every CEO and director in his companies are telling him, please come back home.
Just step back. Yeah. But I must say one thing, he did create some serious drama when it came to the White House. You remember we saw him on stage with the chainsaw. I shouldn't laugh, but that image stays in my head. And he also has done some wild things. You remember his son was in the Oval Office with him, his child picking his nose. So he's brought some sparkle. Can we say that? Or has he not?
I don't know if I would say sparkle, especially with this administration where Donald Trump is such a unique character and he needs the spotlight to be shining on him. Now, I will say this, I think a lot of us thought that there was no way these two could coexist. There was a belief that these two men had egos that were too outsized, and there's no way that they could continue to work together.
Yeah.
So against all odds, in that case, they actually have been working together. But you have to go back to the campaign trail. You know, I've seen numbers now that talk about Musk having spent $250 million of his own dollars to help get Donald Trump elected. Mm-hmm. And he is a controversial figure because there, especially when you go to Wisconsin, where there was this Supreme Court race, and he was handing out checks for $1 million. And that really started to make Americans, it didn't matter if you were a Republican or a Democrat, this isn't right. You know, you shouldn't be buying votes. Perhaps it's happened throughout the history of the country, but to be so blatant about it, it really offended a lot of American voters. And to your point, I think we'll see what the repercussions are in 18 months in the midterms when Americans can go back to the polls.
And also, what do you think of the friendship between Elon Musk and Donald Trump? It was, as you said, unlikely, but do you think it will last the test of time? Do you think we'll see Musk stand by his side? We know Musk was always a Democrat, you know, prior to this.
Well, I mean, we've seen President Trump as, you know, a person who very much transactional in his thinking and the way he deals with everything almost. So Musk was, had a purpose, had a role to play in supporting financially and encouraging other executives from other companies to come on board and support his campaign. He had this great number of followers on X. So he benefited Trump tremendously in running for the elections. And for Trump, that was a very good reason to keep Musk on his side. And Musk was promised this position in the government, in politics. And I think Musk did not really do the proper calculations. He does not have a political background. He didn't know the cost he would pay, he would eventually pay for entering politics with the job of slashing all these jobs and doing the big cuts. It has ended up backfiring in his face. And I think this relationship was very much transactional. And now Musk realizes the cost he suffered from it. He is going to be on his way out. And it remains to be seen how Musk will start commenting on Trump's future policies, especially on tariffs. He was very much against the tariffs.
He was against that. Yes, he was.
How he's going to start comment, whether his comments are going to become more stronger in language. The rhetoric will become stronger once he's out of this administration.
I was actually having a look at the article on Musk and Trump's history. So we know Musk used to be a Democrat. He voted for Obama, Clinton, and Biden. Previous online spats, he's had quite a few. Musk called Donald Trump too old to run. He then, Trump accused Musk of lying following his purchase of Twitter. So, I wonder, should businessmen be involved in politics? Is this a whole other conversation that we might not have time for?
I don't know that I would say businessmen. I would be more inclined to say these two are probably not cut out for this role. Having said that, Donald Trump has done something that, has not been done very often, which is that he won, and then he was out of office, and then he ran and won again. And there's something about the man. I know how you feel because we've spoken about this. I don't know that I would go so far as to say he has charisma, but he has something that appeals to enough American voters for him to be elected a second time.
But also, we must remember that Trump, in his election campaign, did say he was going to reform the White House and these cuts were going to happen. And he was going to reform a lot of the American agencies that were running to pull back money and make America great again. So maybe the reality of doing it so quickly didn't work out as well as hoped.
He wanted to do it quickly. And I think he's almost done with it, according to people I met who were recently in Washington and held talks, had meetings with officials in the Trump administration. It seems that the jobs that are being targeted are the jobs that have to do with anything related to aid, to human rights, even in the cuts in the embassies that Secretary Rubio announced were actually very much related to consulates and offices and embassies and countries in Africa and Central Asia, and these places that deal with oversight on aid and human rights and so forth. In a way, it seems that there is going to see a transition in the U.S. foreign policy where the U.S. will no longer enforce issues of human rights and so forth in these countries, that before the U.S. linked any aid to this country for its record on human rights. From now on, this will no longer matter. It will be, from the point of view of this administration, is this will enable the U.S. to do business much easier and to be more competitive to China in these countries, because China does not intervene in the internal affairs and it's just about business. And this is how the U.S. how did the Trump administration see as a best way to compete on China on equal terms, that both of them will now no longer care about internal affairs and human rights and these issues in these countries. It's going to be just about business.
Well, we're going to see how long this bromance between Musk and Trump will last. But it was so interesting to talk about that. And there's so much to talk about. Two, obviously, massive characters that have dominated the nearly first 100 days of the Trump administration. But finally, we have actually reached a point in the show where, Michael and Riyadh, you've come up with a couple of quirky stories. So you've done your homework for me, and you found some stories that you've enjoyed. Let's start with you, Michael. Sound waves could help people lose weight. What's this all about?
So if you like music and
Yes.
you want to lose some weight, we may have the perfect story for you.
Not Ozempic.
No.
No.
This is one of the beauty parts about this,
Yes.
is that it's non-invasive. So Japanese researchers have found that acoustic sound waves actually have an impact on body tissue. Specifically, what they've discovered is that the acoustic sound waves can stop your fat cells before they become fat cells.
No.
Yes.
That's crazy. Isn't that fascinating?
I'm sure a lot of
Say it. We go back and
or we could possibly see a lot of plastic surgeons losing job over this.
Yes, this is true.
This is going to affect the business, the industry, the sports industry. We're going to see a lot of places for workout introducing possibly the sound waves. It's interesting.
It is so interesting. But also, what I find fascinating is, if you play music to your plants, they also grow quicker. I don't know why I'm bringing that up, but that's something that I've been told.
I think this is one of the, we have taken so many things for granted in our society.
Yes.
And I'm not a huge fan of social media, but I certainly understand that some of the conversations that have taken place on social media are good. And one of them is mental health. And I think what we have taken for granted is our mental health.
Yes.
And I think music and some of the simple pleasures in life, to sound like a grandfather, I think have greater benefits. And the reason that they have stuck around for so long, especially music, why it's been around for so long is because it gives us a joy that we might not always be able to put our finger on.
And a sense of nostalgia. I don't know if you find that about music, but sometimes where I am and a song comes on, I remember, oh my gosh, I was dancing to that song in London at university with my best friend, or I don't know, what about you? What's your favorite song, Riyadh?
Exactly, same way,
Yeah.
Whenever I hear, for example, there are groups today that are very old, like Duran Duran, for example.
Oh, yes, yeah, of course.
When they play their songs, just for me, this is back to college days, where
Yeah.
there was no party that didn't play Duran Duran or Queen or, all these songs that were, very much affiliated in our memory to, certain occasions, certain age time.
No, it is absolutely fascinating how music can really move us and also join people together. But Riyadh, yours is a great story too. It's about air taxis in the UAE. Is this real? Is it actually going to happen? Am I going to be able to get a taxi from downtown to our studios?
Well, it seems to be real. I mean, today the authorities in Abu Dhabi gave clearance for the area where they're going to have the first point. Apparently, there will be specific points. You cannot just stop.
I can't say location here.
Wait for the flying taxi to stop for you. It cannot land anywhere. It will be in certain areas that are authorized, cleared by the Civil Aviation Authority, because it flies. So it is within the mandate of the Civil Aviation Authority to give clearance to the landing areas from where they're going to be launched. So most likely in downtown area there will be a point, and the main, like in the Palm in Dubai, would likely be a point, and also same thing in Abu Dhabi. There would be like certain areas that are close to people, or people can go and just take an air taxi. It shows the progressiveness we have here in the UAE. It will be the first country to do so.
Yeah, no, absolutely fascinating. But I feel like this has come too late, because remember when we watched Back to the Future, there were flying cars, and that was a long time ago. But like Riyadh said, absolutely fascinating. It is a move forward in tech, really, isn't it?
It is, and this is one of the great things about living in this country. Dubai and Abu Dhabi have, sometimes they're on different tracks, but when they want to come together and they recognize something that is stupendous and something that is going to help the brand of the country, I think that they pull out all the stops. They make sure that what it is that they're going to do is properly organized and properly sanctioned. Civil aviation is going to be looking after this. And they make sure that they then put it out there, not just for people who live in the country and visitors, but also for the entire world to recognize that cutting edge technology is available in the UAE.
3 weeks ago, 3 days ago, it was, I heard, in the media over here, that autonomous taxis in Dubai are gonna go into effect next year. Dubai has ordered 1,000 taxis, reach a deal with a company in China that will be building electrical autonomous vehicles that will be operational in Dubai starting 2026.
My gosh, yeah, fascinating.
That's consistent. I mean, the metro in Dubai, for instance, it's driverless.
Yeah.
And this is like the MO for Dubai. When there's something that you think is cutting edge, they'll come up with something that sounds even crazier, and then they'll make it happen.
No, absolutely. Fascinating stories. Thank you so much. Lots of good advice there. Sound waves to help you lose weight and air taxi. I really enjoyed them. Thank you so much for joining me. And that's all we've got time for today. Thanks so much to both of our guests, media strategist and former editor-in-chief Michael Jabri-Pickett, and Al Arabia's geopolitical security analyst Riyadh Kawaji. Here's a reminder of our top stories. The Pope's coffin has been moved to St. Peter's Basilica, where it will remain in an open casket for the public to mourn over the next 3 days. President Donald Trump has said the US is very close to brokering a deal to end the war in Ukraine. And the world's richest man and Tesla boss Elon Musk says he will significantly cut back his role in the US government as his electric car firm profits plunge. And that's all from us on W News Extra. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and also follow us on X. G&T with Tom Burgess-Watson is coming up next, and then it's a dressing room with the football stars Joe Cole, Wayne Bridges and Charlton Cole. Goodbye and thank you so much for joining us.